Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis.
Today we're going to be looking at photosynthesis. You're responsible for knowing the equation as well as the difference between the light and dark reactions. Photosynthesis is a necessary process for life to continue on Earth as we know it. It captures the radiant energy from the sun and then transforms CO2 and water into glucose and oxygen. Let's take a look at what photosynthesis is.
Where does glucose come from? Remember, all energy comes from the sun. Producers take the sun's energy and turn it into glucose. Remember, producers are organisms that use the sun's energy in order to be able to create glucose and be able to function. How does photosynthesis work? In producer cells, there is a small structure called a chloroplast. Inside of every plant cell are millions and millions of little discs called chloroplasts. These chloroplasts capture the sun's energy, CO2 and water, and transform it into glucose and oxygen. They cycle around the cells in order to be able to maximize the amount of sunlight that comes into the plant cell, thus making sure that no one chloroplast is getting more than any other, and thus maximizing the amount of energy a plant can receive. Here you see the chloroplast circulating around a plant cell. The chloroplast is a pigment, colored molecule called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll harnesses the sunlight. Chlorophyll is a pigment, much like how your pigments color your clothes. It captures the light energy and emits a green color. It takes the sun's energy and transforms it, using its energy to further make for glucose and CO2. Chloroplast combines light, water, and CO2 to make sugar and oxygen. Equation of photosynthesis. Reactants, starting molecules, CO2, water, and sunlight. Products and material, oxygen and glucose. Equation, sunlight plus CO2 plus water turns to glucose and oxygen. Now that we've seen the equation, let's look at the types of reactions. Light reaction. This reaction only occurs in producers during the daytime. The light reaction takes place only during the light, hence its name. Takes sunlight and water and stores the energy. The light reaction is part of photosynthesis where the sunlight is captured and stored. The dark reaction happens in the absence of light. When plants are in the dark, they take the energy that they've stored and then use it to create glucose. The energy stored from the light reactions is released. The energy is then used to break the bonds in CO2. Energy that was stored up by the chlorophyll during the daytime is then released to CO2. That energy then is used to break the bonds, forcing splitting the carbons and oxygens. They now have become free-floating atoms that can be rearranged. Reforms carbon and oxygen atoms to create glucose and oxygen. Here is a diagram of the carbons and oxygens being rearranged. Then, bonds are placed in, forming glucose and oxygen.